Listen up.
Welcome to the PowerShell Podcast, the podcast for PowerShell and the PowerShell community. And now, here's your host, Andrew Plaw.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the PowerShell Podcast. Very exciting episode today where we're going to be talking about the do's and don'ts of PowerShell. What should you do? What shouldn't you do? And how you can kind of get bit in the butt if you go the wrong way. So joining me today are podcast legends at this point. You both have been on a whole bunch, as we were just talking about before we started recording. Judd and Gilbert Sanchez. Welcome back again. I mean, you know the deal. What's up? Welcome back to the pod.
Yeah, I think this was a long time overdue. We've talked about doing this. I've known Steven for a few years, and we always we keep talking about doing this. So I'm glad we were finally able to kind of get something going.
Agreed. And it's always a good time to be chatting with you gentlemen, even when there aren't microphones and video cameras and all this business going on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And yeah, Gilbert, let's see, we met, Jamie Nelson introduced us in 2019
Yes.
at PowerShell Summit, and we've been kind of orbit circling ever since then. It's been great.
Yeah, I didn't realize what a magnet you were in the community. I just was like, oh, this is just some random dude my coworkers introducing me to.
His pull's increased too over the past few years.
To be fair, back in 2019, I was new to the community. And that was kind of my, when I talk about, when I tell people, this is one of the things we're going to talk about in the do's and don'ts is do be engaged in the community, right? Yep. That's big for all of us. And, that was my first time where I learned that there's PowerShell levels, where there's where you think you are, and then you go meet a bunch of people and you go, oh, they're farther along than I am. And so then you have a decision to make. Are you good with where you are, or do you want to progress? And I chose to progress. So that's kind of my start of my journey.
Yeah, I think the year we met, that was my first year, and I was super nervous. I remember, you meet these people you see online, right? You've the Kevin Marquettes and the James Brundage, and like you've read their blogs. You're like, wait a second, I stole some of your code for stuff like this is, and like I get to meet you in person, and that first year was super super quiet, kind of stayed low key, and then I realized that it was like such a welcoming community. Everyone wants to see you succeed. Everyone is open to like helping you out. And I realized later that it was like a missed opportunity to really connect more with folks. And so that's when I really got plugged into this, to the community. And I realized that I should be doing more stuff. So this last summit, I definitely was like, I need to be talking to people the whole time.
That's right.
My wife said, hey, when you come back, you better be rested. And I was like, there's no way.
You did a great job, though. I saw you pretty tired a couple nights.
It was good. I had a blast. It was the best conference I've ever gone to.
Yeah. If I could give a corollary, that would be don't just stay in your bubble and think you're like, there's a lot of people who can have a whole bunch of head games when you're just sitting with your own thoughts and struggling against issues without asking for help. No one is uniquely terrible at coding and can't learn certain things. So don't just suffer in silence. Seriously, find a community or some group that you can grow with, and it will really just make the whole process so much better. And for me, like some of my closest friends in real life have come from the community. So there's like a lot of cool opportunity there as well. The whole work thing, but also the personal thing.
Agreed. There was something that Don Jones said, just kind of as an offhand comment, probably to him, but he tossed this out when I was nearby in the summit. He's like, don't try to impress your heroes. And, I thought a lot about that comment afterwards. I was like, man, there's a lot of wisdom in there. But then, there's the well, who are your heroes exactly, and how approachable are they? And so then it's not a, when we're talking about do's and don'ts, this isn't a black and white, easy 1-2 kind of thing, right? There's opinions involved, because there may be someone like, you may be looking at those of us that have been on this podcast for a while and be like, oh, those guys, they really know their stuff. And we're over here going, there is so much more that I need to learn in order to be where that guy is, or where that girl is, or look how talented they are and what they're doing, and don't do that to yourself. Just don't do that. Find the people that are maybe closer to where you are and work with them, and all of you move up, because you'll be the next generation of people coming in, doing podcasts, speaking at conferences, doing your thing, and it doesn't have to be our thing. That's what's great about it.
Yep. Very open source mindset in terms of, we're all better together and we can build together and grow together. And it is not a one-to-one competition at any point in time. It's just you against your former self and just hoping for continual growth. Super powerful stuff. It seems intuitive, like once you've kind of gone through it and seen it play out in your life, but you'd be surprised at how many people maybe haven't heard some of this information or haven't heard imposter syndrome discussed before.
Yeah.
Mm.
Let me add to your don't. I would say, don't be afraid to approach people who you admire in the community, because sometimes you'll see these folks and you might think like, oh my God, people must message them all the time, and they're famous and amazing, and I like, who am I? But I think the thing at Summit that's so interesting is like you get to hang out with a lot of these folks and you realize like these are just normal people, right? And like they happen to know this one particular thing really well. But at the end of the day, they're also learning, and they also want to like, get something out of the conference. They're not just there to be like, behold my wisdom, come bow before me. They're there to also kind of pick up something like, what is the community doing? What's the community interested? What's the new hot tech, right? And, you can approach people you have, you admire, and, say, hey, I really like that you speak publicly. Like, I want to get into that. What do you recommend? How do I get started? Right? Like, what was the thing that helped you in your career? I feel like I'm in this job that I'm stuck at. How do I, did you ever feel like that? And you'd be surprised how often folks are willing to say like, yeah, no, I've been there, and like, here's what I would recommend. And like, maybe I'm not the right person. You should talk to that person. Because I feel like, again, most people want to help.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. In fact, I would recommend everyone listening to this. I think it's up now. Is the Jeffrey Snover talk that he gave at Summit? Oh my gosh, that was complete fire. It was great, talking about the setbacks that he had in his career and the parts where he was going, thinking to himself, I'm fired. What have I done to my career? Those kinds of things. I mean, if Jeffrey Snover goes through those periods, why in the world would we think that we would be immune from those?
Yep.
So,
that's one thing I've discovered from talking to a whole bunch of people is really we are all susceptible to the same challenges. And we're all, even the most accomplished people still deal with imposter syndrome in one way or another on the reg. And to your point, Gilbert, seriously though, reaching out and sharing your perspective, like if something has been helpful to you, reaching out to that module author, the blog writer, and just telling them like, hey, this module or whatever helped me a whole bunch. I was dealing with X, Y, or Z. And, you can use that as an opportunity to connect. But in my opinion, at least everybody I've had on the pod, if you're going to send them a public mess or a private message or like reach out to them on socials on a comment or something, they're more than likely going to get back to you in some capacity. So it's just worth doing, in my opinion. You never know what can be the benefit of it. Like there's so much cool stuff that I see pop off in the community just from like a casual mention of something. And that's all it took to be the spark to like, oh, wow, you get to talk to a subject matter expert who is dying to share what they've already gone through with someone who will understand and be able to appreciate that.
It's wonderful to name drop with, oh yeah, well, I was actually talking to Chrissy Lemaire and about this database stuff, and but it's like you ask for help, and folks are there to help you. So again, I think that's what drew me to this community so much, was just like how helpful everyone was and how positive, and how much, if you are willing to put in the work yourself, the community will help you keep growing. So
absolutely.
Yeah. I name drop Steven all the time. So usually like, oh, it's probably Steven's fault. I don't know.
I'm sure groans were involved in that conversation somewhere. And you're like, that reminds me of Steven Judd. It was terrible. But when we were talking about connecting people, I remember this instance in the last summit where someone was talking to me about some struggle they were having doing a Sapien Forms. And I said, I don't know how to do that, but I know someone who's really good at Sapien Forms and the Sapien Studio. Let me find them and I'll connect you with them so that you two can talk. And I don't actually know, I did connect them, but I don't know if the problem got solved. But I know that I was out of my depth on the Sapien Studio because that's not what I use. And I try not to do the UI forms. That's just something that I try to stay in the console. So I was able to connect people. And, that is what we're doing here when we're sharing our knowledge and we're sharing our time, is we're trying to connect with the audience, but we're also trying to connect the audience with someone else as well.
Yep.
Yeah, we're building a community, right? A community is not just you and me talking. It's you, me, and then Steven. And it's just those three, and then you're done. But no, it's like connecting everybody else in the community, right? Like,
Yep. That's kind of like the point of the pod, is like to just expose all the different experts and cool people and people who are maybe on the earlier stages of their journey as well, and let magic ensue. And we are so fortunate. The community is so great. Also want to add a bit of context. You two actually worked together for a period, so people didn't know that.
Yes,
we did. Yep. I broke Gilbert's heart just a little bit by not picking his team when I had team choices. That's one of the unusual things that Meta does. By the way, we both worked at Meta. It was Facebook at the time. And they allow you to pick your team, and the teams pitch the candidates to try to get you to come to their team when they have openings on their team. And I found that to be very interesting. I wound up picking an excellent team, but unfortunately it wasn't Gilbert's team. And I felt bad about it for a little while, and then he yeeted himself off to another team, and I was like, "You'd have left me anyway, man."
Yeah, I was a little sad that Steven didn't join my team, but I can't blame him. He went to a good team. But yeah, it was. But I think even then we still worked very closely. I think that company as a whole is very good about connecting folks who do similar types of work, and collaboration is a positive. So if you're collaborating with other teams, it's, those are plus points on the, at the end of the year when they're looking at your reviews and stuff. So
nice.
Yep.
Passion for PowerShell.
Yeah. Meta being a software company and doing software-ish things, I learned a lot from that company. One of the things I learned for certain is that everything breaks at scale. Every last thing will break at a certain level of scale. And so, when you start thinking about your code, this is one of the do's, is start thinking about the size and the scope of your code. So do be thinking about, where is this going to go, and how many servers is it going to hit, and how many users, because I'll promise you there is a point at which your get AD user command will not return all of your users because your Active Directory is so large. And now you've been introduced to the awesome concept of paging. And you'll be introduced to that through pain, because it will happen to you. Or you'll do something, you'll be like, run a command. Like this happened to me in my career. I was running a command against about 2,000 servers, and we were looking for a INI configuration entry. And so I sent it off in the evening time, and I came back the next day and it wasn't done yet. And I was like, I should have seen some results by now. I'll let it go the rest of the day and see what happened. Nope, didn't do anything. Well, that's when I learned through pain, which is usually how we learn, that the .NET file system handler has a logarithmic memory leak to it. That when you hit a certain size of files or a certain count of files, not size of files, certain count, it starts getting slower. And the slowness is logarithmic, and it just gets slower and slower and slower. And so I had to rewrite my script, and that's when I learned about the parallelism of invoke command. And so if you're not familiar with invoke command and its parallel capabilities, you need to get familiar with that if you're trying to solve problems where you're sending out commands to remote systems and you want to get the results back quickly.
PowerShell 7, right?
That is actually in PowerShell 3.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it goes way back.
Oh, for each object parallel is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, for each object parallel is the one that's using the thread jobs for that. But invoke command has had built-in parallelization for a long time. Now, the key to that, I'm going to give you the pro tip, is that you have to send it in an array into the computer name parameter. So when you're sending it your list, if you do a get AD computer and then you pipe it into invoke command and you run your command that way, it's only running against one server at a time because you're piping it through, and it's only coming away one time at the pipeline. What you want to do instead is do the invoke command, and then in the computer name, do your get AD computer there, and then just return the property of .name, pipe that in. Now you've put 2,000 computers into there, and it has a throttle size command. Is it throttle limit, throttle size? I forget the property off the top of my head, but then it'll do as many as you want. I think it defaults to 32.
That is a pro tip. I have a feeling there's many automations out there that are running in that first manner you specified, and they have no idea. They just think it's taking a long time.
I really hope that there's someone who will feedback on this and go, "You saved me."
My head was in the exact same spot. I hope just one person who has that misconfigured thing can like remember back and fix it.
Oh yeah.
I think I'd add a do to that, right? Of like, do start simple, right? Especially once you have, there's this thing that happens, at least it happened to me, was where I wrote very basic code, write simple functions, and then started writing these like crazy functions that would try to be super smart about how it's doing a thing and kicking off multiple processes. And I'm, juggling, chainsaws in the middle, and then, troubleshoot. And like, but then later realizing like actually like keeping it simple was like actually the way to go, because the thing in the middle, the chainsaw juggling is like super hard to debug, and like, where did this go wrong, right? And I think if you start simple, and then add complexity when it's necessary, is like the best time to add complexity, because you tend to, I see a lot of folks, they tend to prematurely over optimize, and so they're like, well, I'm going to get ready for the scale that's 10x what our company ever has, and then you're like, wait, why? Like you've saved 30 you saved 30 seconds, but like the code is like infinitely more hard to debug and like understand for anybody else. So there's always like a trade-off. So start simple.
Yeah, the more readable it is, the more self-documenting it is, which brings me of a do that I want to share. It needs a lot of caveats, so I might need your help for it. But before, we're going to hear a quick word from our sponsors.
This is the PowerShell Podcast.
Most of you know the PowerShell Podcast is sponsored and made possible by PDQ. I've had questions from listeners asking, what's PDQ and what do you do? Well, we help IT teams automate endpoint management. PDQ Connect is our cloud-based tool for real-time software deployment, patching, scripting, remote access, and vulnerability management. It's fast, flexible, and built for people who just want things to work. If you want to see it in action, head to pdq.com/podcast and check out our interactive demo. No signups, no emails, no credit card, just a fast and easy way to explore how it works. That's pdq.com/podcast. Automated endpoint management that doesn't slow you down.
Listen. And now, back to the PowerShell Podcast.
Lovely word from our sponsors there. All right, I got to share my do. Do use comments in your code, and consider using write verbose if you have something that you think should be written in a comment. If you explain the script in write verbose, it can kind of help the next person who's using it, a little bit discoverable. But I think there's some caveats with comments, because it can get out of hand at times. You guys ever seen one of those scripts with like an insane amount of comments for every little thing?
No, and I've never written one like that.
I was going to be like, it was me.
I've been there too.
Yeah, there's a million videos on commenting in your code, and one of the things that I see that happens is when code comments lie. That is the worst. I think that is like one of the biggest sins of code commenting, is like, if you're like, this code is going to set this date to this thing, and then the code changes, and then that actually is wrong. When you're troubleshooting, if you rely on the comment, your version in your head is going to be wrong, and so that's super painful.
I'm trying to remember who it was that said, when you do your comments, you should do why, not what.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe a lot of people have said that. I can't attribute it to a person, but I remember hearing that, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's actually pretty good. Or you may need to explain a what if it's not an obvious what. So like, I will pick on my good friend regex. There have been known to be regex commands that are not easy to read. And so you might need to explain that one. So that becomes this isn't a why, this is a what. This is what this command is doing. And then you say why it's there. You say, well, this is why this is here, because it's doing this. So I've seen those examples. But yeah, don't get out of hand. One of the things I did, Andrew, when you're talking about using write verbose, I used to comment my code a lot, and I thought, once I learned about write verbose, this is many years back, I was like, you know what, that's a pretty slick way. Well, so I switched to it. Well, do you always go back to all your old code and go refactor everything based on your new knowledge? No, gracious, why do that? This is one of my favorite phrases that I tell people, that working code is working code. There's nothing wrong with your code if it's working. You may want it to be better. There may be better ways to do it. But at the time you wrote it and it worked, that's good code because it works, right? So you don't go back and refactor. But then when I do touch them, I'm like, okay, well, I want to change these comments to write verbose. So I used the regex replace capability of VS Code to go find everywhere where the pound symbol is at the start of the line, replace that with write verbose and put a double quote there, and then put a double quote on the end. So now my comment is now a write verbose.
I would be a little nervous about that. Because I write some crazy comments. So if I accidentally include a reference to a variable in the comment, I wouldn't want that to suddenly get interpolated, and suddenly now the thing is doing weird stuff that I didn't expect.
Sometimes I like
single
that,
quotes,
though.
maybe that's okay.
Okay, fine. Use single quotes,
Sure.
and you'll be fine.
Yeah,
right. So it won't expand them.
Like if I'm doing a function with the body, I will absolutely output that, like format table or whatever, and output it in the verbose message, just as an aside.
I almost always do JSON compressed JSON, especially when I have like complex objects, where I want to see the object, but I obviously can't just output it. I want it, but I potentially want to parse it. I like to use JSON.
So that's curious. I'm going to ask a question about that. Why not use write debug instead of write verbose for that?
So I do. So even with write debug, there's a lot of, I've had situations where, because this is relying on the object to, like, for it to toString, the certain objects don't toString very nicely, right? They just like give you the name. Right. Having a JSON object, it looks more like what it might look there, but definitely with the debug. So when you have a .NET or I guess a .NET object, when you do the method .toString, so
gotcha.
It will print the string.
Yes. Sorry, I was thinking like it's a toString, like TWO. Sorry. No,
so the method, right? But again, not everything implements a toString method. And sometimes you're like, oh, I'm waiting to debug this thing, and it takes forever to get there, and then it prints like the name of the type of object, and you're like, well, this is not helpful at all. Like, I needed to see what the value of a certain property was. Like, great, like I got to start all over again. So I tend to use a lot of convert to JSON with compress, and then that's usually when it does debug. One thing I often think about, and maybe is like not worth debating, is like the cost of interpolating some of those things. And so if you're like interpolating a bunch of code that is you're only ever going to see sometimes, like, is that worth it? But it's probably like nanoseconds, right? It's probably not a huge deal.
Sure. My rule of thumb on the write verbose versus write debug is whenever I'm trying to give information back to somebody who's wanting to know what step we're on or where we are in the code, that's what write verbose is. And whenever I'm returning objects, then I'm using debug, because that's, especially if you're working headless remote, and so your job is running and you can't interact with it, then being able to stream out that debug and evaluate your objects is very handy. Now, that's not to say don't put your object into a write verbose statement, because of course I've done that too. It's all based on the when you do it and why you're doing it. And for people that may be curious about the various write commands and you want to learn more information, shameless plug, I do have a video on that up on the YouTubes. I actually have a couple of them that I did. One I did for the Gainesville user group. That was yours.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. I remember that.
I would recommend going to see that one, not because the other one's any worse. The other one was more interactive, but I refined my code and my jokes a little bit in that one. So I felt like they landed a little better, even though the audience was muted and I could not hear their groans.
Oh, I heard the groans. Trust me.
You can see the grounds. Like,
the transition that I went on was like, okay, comments, write verbose, add him, and then eventually some kind of write log. I wrote one, and then I think sometimes I use PS frameworks. Do you find that is a necessary third step? Like, does everyone need to be writing to a log at a certain point in time and you have enough scripts and you want to keep track of them and show your boss? Or what's your take on that?
Hot take.
Let's hear it.
I'll let
Gilbert has
I'm gonna explode. So gosh. I think when you work at an enterprise scale, especially things that are destructive, you want to know. Like anything that potentially could help you, and this is even maybe more than logs, right? Like anything that's destructive, having the capability to be like, oops, like, and try to be able to work your way backwards.
Yeah. Like outputting some kind of custom object or something, and then being able to import that and redo it.
Yeah, I think in enterprise level modules that you expect to run on your like whole fleet, that's probably worth doing. Some sort of logging, right? Like it could be a log on disk, although that's probably the worst one. Splunk, I have grown to really appreciate Event Viewer. It has, there's some things that aren't great about it, but like if you've ever run Log Rotator and you're like, God, I wish I had this on Windows, like Event Viewer is it, man. Like you just set up a size of your event, like event log, and it'll just clean itself up. Now, that also is potentially problematic if you write too many logs and those get rotated away. But if you use some sort of central like log aggregation tool, you'll get all of that in one place. And frankly, that's probably, if you're running things at that scale, you probably want to have that too. So
yeah, I would concur with that. There was a lot of times in my career where I didn't need logging because the output was fast and it was minimal and it wasn't a big deal. The destructive part is very important. And also if you're doing scheduled code, so like if you're using any kind of task scheduler, be that cron or the Windows task scheduler, and these things are running without anyone watching them, you absolutely want to be logging that data somewhere. Text file, fine. I would prefer you use the write event log so that you're putting that into what Gilbert was talking about, is you're getting enterprise capacity. When is the last time anyone talked about how there was a problem with the event logger in Windows?
Yeah.
Like I can barely even remember there ever being problems with it. That's a robust piece of software. Kudos to whoever wrote that.
So at Meta, we were, I can't remember the exact issue, but there was a concern about us. Somebody had a concern that, hey, maybe the issue we're seeing could be that we're not logging and the event viewer is overloaded or something. And we happened to get somebody from Microsoft who actually was extremely familiar with it. And I remember asking them, if there is a block on disk, will the log still be captured? And the answer was yes, right? Like it'll get in memory and then it will put it to disk. And because it is such a low level process, the likelihood that it will fail is extremely unlikely that it will fail. And so that's sort of part of why I've been like, oh, I really actually want to like lean into that. That's actually one of the things that makes Windows like really powerful, right? Like it's like this thing, if your disk is messed up, we'll still log it. Like hopefully it comes back because then we can write it to disk. But it's pretty nice.
Yep. So you find logging to the event log is a good way to kind of go about your stuff, and then aggregating those event logs through some other one that most mature orgs will have.
Right. Almost every organization has some level of SIM or SIEM or however you want to pronounce that, where they're capturing these logs and you're pulling those forward. Then the key is, are you doing a custom log, and do you need to let your Splunk administrators know, hey, I'm now writing, and I'm not writing the system or one of the standard logs. I'm going to write to my own custom one, and that's fine because PowerShell logs to its own custom one for things like the command processor. And that's how security people can go see what are all the PowerShell commands that have been run on said system, right? So that's all written and logged in that, and I think it's really safe, secure, reliable. And so once you hit a certain size and scale, you'll know when that's your problem, and this will be your solution.
Dang, we went through a couple years of like growth for someone, I think. And kind of give them some things to look out for there. So I guess start with comments, then go to write verbose, and then eventually writing to logs, and check out the event log as your kind of method for that, and then query it however you query it.
I wanted one comment type that didn't get mentioned that I want to make sure we mention is regions. Use regions.
Yes.
Especially with VS Code, it is extremely handy to be able to take an entire code of region. These are your functions and you want to close them down or something, or this is the region that goes and grabs the disks before I go delete everything or something. I don't know, something crazy. But you can kind of collapse that. Once you sort of understand that kind of logical grouping of what this section of code does, you say, okay, I have a good grasp of what this does. I can kind of hide this away. And I know in the back of my brain, I still kind of understand what that, piece looks like. I can now focus on understanding the rest of the code.
Yep.
I have region beef. I have beef with regions. And here it is. It's such an old holdover. It's kind of dumb, but it is what it is. You cannot have a space between the hash and the word region or the word end region. And I find that annoying. I know it's nitpicky, but come on.
What if your comment had region in it? If you did that, it would now become a region, and you'd be screwed. You'd have to come up with an extra word. It would have to be the
first word. And I'm such a shortcut. Everything. I control / my comments all the time, and so I'll type region control /, and they're like, oh, that doesn't work. Now, pro tip, or Steven's opinion on that is, okay, you just have to get over that. But on the end region, people don't always put what the end region is closing out. So whatever I put the region name for, so if it's region, iterating through the servers for X, then at the end reason I put iterating through the servers for X. I see people drop that all the time. And so then you get to an end region, you're like, I don't know what this is ending.
Yep. Do it when you create it too. Yeah, I've been in that situation in so many ways. Sometimes I'll delete an extra end curly, whatever they are, to end a for each loop, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll just get lost and can't figure out what it matches to.
I do have a great transition for one of my other do's.
Yeah, we're in your wheelhouse.
All right,
we're in your wheelhouse. We're in VS Code.
I'm here for it.
Yes.
Let's go.
Okay. So my do is set up your PDE, which is your personal development environment. What that means is, if a VS Code is your tool of choice, awesome. If you want to use NeoVim,
because
awesome.
You're a monster.
Hey, I like NeoVim. It's
don't hate.
It's great. Anyways, whatever your IDE is, whatever your workflow is, personalize that. Don't rely. I've seen this happen in VS Code. It happens a lot in NeoVim, funny enough, where people are like, here's my setup, and people think I'm going to go take that exact thing and I'm going to use it, and then they're like, oh my god, I don't know how, I'm this is so foreign, I don't know what to do, and they struggle. Taking kind of the standard and then slowly building on it and starting to think to yourself, wow, it's really annoying. I really hate typing pound region and then having, or hitting the shortcut that I normally hit. The reason I thought about this was my immediate thought was I should write a snippet, a VS Code snippet for that, because that also bothers me. Or it would be really cool for me to highlight a chunk of code, hit a shortcut, and then throw a region around the whole thing. And like that's something that almost any IDE can do that supports, snippets or whatever, whatever they call them. So like personalize your environment and don't wait for somebody else to do it for you. When you see it, when you find a problem, fix it for yourself so you don't have to keep dealing with it.
That's really solid advice. Also, a really good idea for someone out there who maybe it exists already, I don't know, but you want to write a VS Code plugin where you highlight a range of code and you hit your shortcut key and it prompts you for what the title is. You put the title in and it puts region with that title and then end region with that title at the bottom. Boom, man, that would be slick.
So you can do that with a snippet, actually. I'm going to try to put something together and maybe we'll throw it into the show notes.
Oh, I was just about to say I was going to give something away if somebody does that, but
I'm going to learn something.
Sure. So look, there's nothing wrong with other people. You know what? I will write something, but also if you're listening to this and you're like, I would like to know how snippets work, write that one. It's actually shouldn't be too hard, but it's enough to teach you how to do things like take the current highlight, insert some characters before, insert some characters after, and then write the same text in two places. Because that's basically what we're trying to do, right? Sure. And so it should be doable. So like if take this as a challenge to customize your environment.
I love it.
You'll benefit from it too, long term. I mean, little thing. I need that,
Yeah. Yeah. I've got another do if we're ready for another one. So this is kind of dovetailing into the regions in that I recommend people that you focus on PowerShell functions. And when you focus on your function, you focus very carefully on making it atomic, make it output one object type, because that is also very important. And also use common parameters if it makes sense for your function. So for example, you should use .name or .fullname if you're trying to get the item or the full path. And you may want literal path as well, because those are all very common for get item and get child item, right? If you're going to tie something to the AD, go look at the properties that an AD object has and match that up for your code. And so when you're writing functions, I love writing atomic functions, and I try to keep them laser focused. Like this thing does one thing. And I'm actually very careful about my verbs as well, so that my function won't do add or set. It will either add an object, or it will modify an object, or it will get an object, or it will remove an object. I don't combine those into a script or a function. And so this is Stephen's do, is try to write your functions really short, very focused, and then output an object. Because then when you do that, you can then go write your business logic in what Don quoted as I feel like I keep quoting Don tonight, is he calls that the controller script, right? So the controller script contains your business logic, and it says, I'm going to go do this after I get this, and then I'm going to set that, and then I'm going to finish by outputting this, right? That's all in your business logic type of script, and everything else, everything that it calls, try to make it as atomic as possible. So there's my do. I'm curious to see what you guys think about that.
I mean, it's very functional programming, which is it's a big thing. So borrowing some ideas from that.
The thing that got me to that place the fastest was testing. Once you realize like, oh, I have a function that's actually like, there's all of these branches that it could potentially go down, and you're like, oh, this is like a pain to test. One of the things that I tend to have folks who are newer to testing do is take a function that's like that and say, okay, what are these things? What in here it's probably actually made up of multiple functions. How can we take sections of code, pull those out, make it a function, refer to the code? So don't even change the code in between, right? All you're doing is you're wrapping into a function and you're calling it, and then test that. And then, now you can start tweaking things and making that work better. And oh wait, we actually used that same type of logic multiple times. We just never had it as a function. Now it's a function. I don't have to redo it. So
yeah. I think the path I see many people take is they have some code, eventually they learn some more PowerShell, pipe some things together, eventually learn about functions, create some functions, maybe create some modules. But at a certain point, the functions get very clever and they're trying to flex all the cool new things that they know, which is great practice. But then they have these things that are very hard to maintain. I've clearly fell into that pattern and that pitfall before, but just it's something to be aware of those who are on their journey, kind of hungry right now. It can be fun to create those functions, but ultimately for longevity, maintaining it, passing it on to other people, you need these things to not be very hard to read and overly complicated.
Yeah, that's very true. And also, going along with what Gilbert was saying is once you start shrinking those things down and putting them together, it may make sense for performance reasons for you to combine them back together. And so now we're talking about actually having a build process and a pipeline for your code. And, for those of you starting at PowerShell, you're like, oh my gosh, this mountain is so big and it's cool. It's cool. You're not there yet. That's fine. Keep working on what you're working on, because like scale, like how everything breaks at scale, you will come to the point where you'll just naturally go, okay, this is where I'm at. I now need to combine my functions into a PSM1 file, and I need the PSD1 file. And if those terms don't mean anything to you, that's okay. It's all right now. But then you also have your tests that line up and do all this stuff for you. And then I know at some point we're going to talk about this too. Do use code repos and get your versioning together, because that will save you pain. It will. Now, it's not going to save you from gray, because gray's coming for all of us, but it will save you some pain if you have the ability to go backwards. So I know Git is like, everyone talks about Git. It's got some jank to it. We all know it, but you got to learn it. And if you're just doing it for yourself, it's actually pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Don't worry about branching when you're getting started, because branching is what's going to help you, help future you and help team future you where you're working with other people. But if you're just getting started, just learn to commit your code, comment your code in Git, and just keep pushing to the branch that you're using, if it's main or whatever. Now, I've said some potentially inflammatory things, and I see Gilbert stroking his facial hair.
Before I go into that, I think this was I think source control was one of Andrew's due. So I want to make sure he gets a chance to lay down any additional.
If you know, you know. I think everyone pretty much, if you've used any kind of code ever at work for any sufficient amount of time, you have to have it. You just have to. It's the accepted standard. Not just in your org, and like every org ever, you have to be using source control, and you'll run into so many issues if you don't, right? Like you can't do that multiple file thing with your scripts. It'll work if you have one script and it's like the only thing your brain focuses on, but like soon that's going to run out. And even still, you might make mistakes along the way. And it just, can't be doing that. But Gilbert, I think you had a point earlier when we were talking about, I don't know what it was, maybe snippets or something. I saw your finger go up. Do you remember what you were going to say?
No, I was laughing because the quote that I wanted to share earlier about complexity, it's also kind of applies. So one thing before I get into that, you had mentioned, you might get into build systems. And if you're new to the process, you might be like, hold on, wait a second, like what the heck is that? If you're still new in your PowerShell journey, you don't need to worry about that. What is nice to know is that it exists, because one day you're going to get to the point where you're like, okay, I went from writing one long script to writing a functions. Now I have my functions in a module, but like, gosh, I really wish, I have a particular process that I really wish these things were all one file. That's when, wait, you know what? I remember somebody said this on the podcast. Let me go look at that. And that's when you can start to learn that. Or, hey, somebody mentioned build systems. What are some build systems I could use? And And so you don't have to know the whole answer. You just have to know that that path exists. I think so. The thing I was pointing my finger to was this. This is a quote from a random person I saw on Discord, but it was like so profound that I was like, I have to save it, and I pull it up so often. But he wrote, "When engineering a system, physical or informational, the bugs you encounter will always, by necessity, be ever so slightly more clever than you were when you designed the thing. Therefore, you want to engineer the least clever possible system that you can get away with, so as to ensure that your bugs don't end up beyond your absolute capacity for cleverness." And again, this is just like some random person in a Discord and just like dropped this, and I was like, literally, like my world was like shaking. I was like, oh my God, it's so good. But I mean, I think keep it simple. Don't worry about the complexity bits until you need them. Don't worry. Build systems are there. The community is there where when you're ready for that, you can ask. And trust me, there'll be dozens of us coming out of the woodwork being like, hey, check this thing out. This is really cool.
Yep.
So
yeah, I think part of it, learning something new, is like building your glossary, like getting a roadmap of what the freak is even out there. And then it's a little bit easier to understand where to go. And, you know, it's not about, especially a lot of people who are listening to this podcast aren't maybe at that point, or maybe they're past it, whatever. But just knowing that it exists for so many of the things we talk about is like half the battle. Whenever you're ready for that or encounter a need for it at work, then you can dive in, and there's plenty of resources that you'll have already at least heard about, even if you didn't fully absorb the info, that you can take with you.
I have a question. Do you gentlemen know what gold plating is in code or agile by any chance?
No.
I do
thought
not.
this was
All right. So I went to an agile training thing, and I discovered that I am the king daddy of all the people I know of gold plating. And gold plating is someone has a feature that they asked for. And so you're designing around said feature. This is the whole software development idea. And I'm over there going, wouldn't it be cool if this thing did A, B, C, D, E as well? And so although those may be good ideas, they've not been asked for and they were not scoped. And so you're gold plating the thing. And this comes back to what Gilbert was just talking about, where how clever you are with your gold plating, that will come back and bite you in the bugs, because those bugs will be very clever as well. And I've done this to myself so many times. I now know that I need to watch out for that, because it's a character thing for me. I'm like, ooh, this will be fun, because I might get a little enticed by a flashy thing here and there.
It's a challenge, right? We love the challenge. We love. It's funny because even when we started this conversation, I've been thinking about coding as an art form for a little bit. Like, it's fun. So I'm about to tie this into a bunch of the things that we talked about. So everybody makes their art slightly different. You can make a certain, you can paint a certain style and still learn from an artist who paints a completely different style, right? You might be a surrealist and you might learn from impressionists. To the PDEs, right? Like, just because there's a quote that's like, just because you set your easel up like Vincent van Gogh will not make you Vincent van Gogh, right? You could have all the same exact equipment and you walk up to that easel, and if you haven't put in the hours, it's not gonna show. And so I think, like, learning from others, I don't need to have every tool in the chest to start, right? Like, it's okay to start with a piece of paper and doodling, and you get good at that, and you're like, all right, well, maybe, that person's, they're like watercoloring. Maybe I should check that out. And you start to build, and eventually the skills all of these skills are kind of distinct skills that kind of play into how you write your code and how you build things. And like, over time that gets shaped, and like, even now, like, it's still fun to be like, ooh, like, yeah, I do want to, like, it would be cool to add that feature. I do want a gold plate. Like, like, it would be, this is a challenge. Like, oh, I saw that thing I thought would be interesting, and like, wouldn't it be neat? Do you know how many TUIs I've written since Sean Spector, or since PowerShell Spector, came on the podcast? Like, Sean Laurie?
Yes.
Apologies if I'm getting that wrong.
You got it
I've
right.
written so many TUIs, and but it was, there's been times where it's like, oh yeah, that's overkill, and there's been times where you're like, that's exactly what we needed. And so it's just you just pick up little things that you end up carrying into your other projects. But like Steven said, is you got to be careful, because like eventually, guess who's on the hook to troubleshoot and support all those TUIs is like this guy. Like,
I know what the problem is with your TUIs is that you've been sending those to .TUI stringy.
Oh boy,
there we go.
I knew we wouldn't escape.
Hey-o, there he is. I want to tie what you said, Gilbert, because you said you got to put in the hours like Van Gogh. You're spitting fire. I was catching it. But I think to that point, you have to make your like your PDE, your experience coding fluent, so you don't have to leave context. You can put in those hours comfortably. We all get distracted, so working on that, but also working on the way you hold yourself and not beating yourself up. Like if you're running into issues, you have to make it a state that you can handle being in for a long period of time. One, because you deserve it as a person. We should all feel good. But also, two, because like you're not going to be able to if it's draining in that way. So, trying to find the ways that as you learn more about yourself and things like that, that you can be kind to yourself and understand that we all have bad coding days and we all make stupid mistakes. So each time I make a stupid mistake, I kind of feel good because I know that it's like such a relatable thing for everyone. You can be writing great code all day and then you freaking use the wrong variable name or whatever the case may be, and you have it referenced somewhere else.
I misspelled the username because I typed it wrong. And I was like, this stupid thing, why not worky? And, I was trying to explain it to someone else and I went, oh, that N is actually an M.
Yep.
Oops.
Yeah. There's a reason why there's always the joke about the missing semicolon, right? Like, thankfully PowerShell we don't have to deal with that, but like it's so relatable, right? Like everybody makes that mistake of like how did this single character ruin so many hours of my day, right? Like I'm like I've lost some hair, I've got some more grays, like it's like one character, like it did me dirty. So it I think that's a standard. It's par for the course for working with computers.
Another shout out for using VS Code, and it's PS Script Analyzer syntax checker. And if you've got some weird syntax checker, you can write your own. Some weird syntax you have to apply by, you can write your own for that. And Andrew, I wanted to come back on something you said, which I really loved, which is talking nicely to yourself. People, myself included, tend to say, "You big dummy, why didn't you think of this? You should have thought of this." And I heard someone explain this. I have two things on that, actually. One is when you're talking to yourself, talk to yourself like you would talk to either a coworker or a friend of yours.
Yep.
So you wouldn't use abusive language of any kind to someone you cared about. So care about yourself enough to not use that kind of language toward yourself. Just go, hey, I see where you were struggling with this. It's probably because you haven't slept in a week because you were sick for a while and then you got behind at work. And so you're trying to catch up and you were stressed and things happened in your life. It's okay because it happens to a lot of us. You'll be fine. Just tell yourself you'll be fine. And then the other thing was I was listening to someone talk, and I'm really sorry that I can't remember who it was because I would love to give attribution, but they were talking about the journey from I don't know to I understand. And it's not here's this point, and I should take this long to get from here to here. Because in the middle, they describe it as the valley of despair. And the people who are able to stay in the valley longer without getting frustrated, knowing that they'll eventually, if they're moving along, get to the point of understanding, those are the resilient people. Those are the people who are able to deal with challenges that are long and hard and take effort to wind their way through. Because you don't know when you entered a problem how long it'll take you to get to understanding. And I'm not even talking about solution. I'm talking about understanding, right? And so, don't lose your focus or your enthusiasm. I know it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy because when you're in the valley, it's called the valley of despair for a reason because it's hard in there. But then when you come out, you're going to have all the knowledge, you're going to have the wisdom, you're going to have the understanding, and then the other people will still need to be on their journey, but you'll be able to help people, and that's what matters.
Yep. And shout out to all the listeners who are in that valley of despair right now, going through their journeys with us. We appreciate you. We feel for you. In a certain way, though, I'm jealous. I remember how much fun it was to be discovering PowerShell and all the new things. And, my brain was just so absorbed with it for so long. But yeah, I found myself really benefiting from eventually learning this. But for a long time, whenever I was learning PowerShell as a beginner, get to a certain point, I'd get confused and I would just boom, end it. When, to your point, the biggest strides you make are when you're confused as heck and you don't leave the terminal. You stay with it, you push through, maybe you find the solution, and it's a huge aha moment for you that you can then move forward from. But you have to spend that time because you grow the most when your brain is like that, at least for me. And once I was able to start doing that and embracing that, I was able to level up majorly. But if you don't let yourself do that, it's going to be a little tougher.
I think something I wanted to add to that was I was kind of chuckling because I'm like, oh man, I'm like a glutton for the valley of despair, right? Like I love the challenge the challenge is I think the part that is like the most interesting for me personally. I think that's where it's like, oh my gosh, like this is a problem that not like there's been 3 people who have ever done this, and and this is less of a case now, but I feel like back in the day it would be like, oh my God, I found one forum post where one person asked a question about this one particular error, and that forum doesn't even like let you log in anymore. Like that person's long gone. They never gave an answer, right? But I think I think you can look at it as a valley of despair of like, oh my God, like what am I gonna do? How am I gonna get out of this? Or you can look at it as like, this is a challenge. Like, yeah, this is supposed to be hard. Like this is why we're getting paid. They're not paying me because this is easy, right? Like this is the challenge. This is like, you're the guy solving the puzzle or the gal solving the puzzle, right? Like this is the fun part. And so yeah, definitely when there's times where you're like, oh my gosh, like I can't understand it. My old manager, this was more in the context of like when you're getting paged in the middle of the night of like, you wake up, you need a pot of coffee, make a pot of coffee. Because if you approach the problem and your headspace is not right and you're groggy, your brain isn't going to be working correctly and you're going to make mistakes. So if you find, if you're at a point where like, I'm at the terminal, I'm going to solve this, but you're like, you keep getting it wrong, you'd be surprised. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've definitely had those moments where I walk away and, I'm taking a shower or something, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's there, right? Or like right before bed, right as I'm about to fall asleep, like, oh, what about this? And like suddenly the solution comes to you. And it's because you give your brain a little bit of a chance to kind of relax and like, process, and then suddenly, walking, right? Walking is a great way to just like get that, right? So, yeah, I mean, don't be afraid of the challenge. Not everybody knows it instantly. God knows I've spent, plenty of time trying to troubleshoot something silly only because I was exhausted, right? And being like, coming with fresh eyes and suddenly like, oh yeah, the problem is obviously this problem. Like, this is very obviously the problem. Like, okay, how did I miss this all yesterday? But, the brain does weird stuff, so.
It's the concept of the whole rubber duck debugging, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a strong case to be said for articulating the problem out loud, even if you're talking to no one. Mm-hmm. You just talk your way through it, because the language center of the brain is disconnected from, or not disconnected, it's not the same as your just general processing from information coming in through your eyes. So then when you start talking about it, you'll have insights that you wouldn't otherwise have. And when you're talking about, you lay down and you have this thing where your brain just goes, aha, here's the answer. I used to actually tell my brain to myself, hey, I can't remember this thing, but I know I've known it in the past. So what I want you to do, brain, is go find that for me and then let me know when you found it. And just let me know.
Well, async.
Total
let it cook
async.
A little bit. Yeah.
It is surprising how well that works. And people listening to this going, this dude's nuts. Like, no. I want you to try
A little.
Maybe. I may be broken, but I'm not nuts. That's different. So I want you to try it, because the next time you're like, I can't remember this. I can almost remember it. Just tell your brain, go get that for me and let me know when you have it. And then trust that your brain's going to be like, I got it. And I'll tell you what, I'll just be talking like this. I'll be like, there's the answer. It just flashed into my head. I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't trying to find it. And I have it. And it works. It's crazy when it works. I love it.
Those are the best moments. Like, seriously, you get so much serotonin when you have those aha moments and it kind of clicks.
This is why the valley of despair seems like the wrong way to look at it, right? It's like, oh, I know when I figure this out, like, ooh, I'm gonna walk around the house, like, hey, babe, like, I figured this thing out in PowerShell, and she's just like, what? What are you talking about? Like, I'm cook, like, not right now. Like, go tell your friends.
To be fair, it's easy to talk like that unless your boss and your manager and your director are all calling you going, why isn't this fixed yet? Yeah. Under the gun, under pressure,
for sure,
you're in the valley of despair. You're like, this
for
sucks.
sure. For sure.
Or 3 a.m, wake up call, everything's on fire. It's your job to fix it. That also sucks. And so we're not being flippant here. I know Gilbert well enough to know he's not just be like, it's going to be fine, and you're going to be dancing around with your Superman cape on later. Like, yeah, you may be, but you're going to have to get through that first.
Yep. We're running up on the end here. So do we have any final dues we want to share, Gilbert?
I'm going to use, I think I'm going to use the last do as kind of a tie into a little bit of all these things, right? And that's to take notes. That moment that you're talking about where it's late at night, you have directors calling, being like, what's going on? That's when your brain doesn't work. Like, your brain's like panic mode. I got, adrenaline pumping, and I'm trying to figure out why the service is down, and oh my God, this is costing money, and oh my gosh, is this going to fall on me? And what am I going to do? And suddenly your brain's not like honed in on solving the problem. So, like, use whatever note-taking tool you love. I really like Obsidian, but that's my personal preference. I know a lot of folks like OneNote, Notion. I mean, really, whatever works for you, right?
Pen and pad, old school.
Pen and pad. Hey, I don't have the stack of notebooks, but I have stacks of notebooks, right? Like, actually, even just a pen and pad to just jot down a quick thing, like, the act of taking the note reinforces that piece in your brain, right? Like, and then all these quotes and things I've like referred to, like, you see me kind of typing over here because I'm pulling up my notes, right? Like, that random thing on Discord was like a note I took that I thought was like, hey, this is so good that I want to keep this around and I want to really think about it later. Like, thank you, random person on the internet. But like, find the thing that works for you, that, that at 3 a.m, when your brain's half firing and the coffee's still kicking in, that you can be like, man, you know what? I think I remember writing down, here's the server name, or this is the process to do that. Or, having those things kind of handy is like super, super helpful.
Yeah. They refer to as like your second brain, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. This brain barely works. I definitely need to supplement it with a second one, maybe a third one. So
that's a great tip. All right, Judd, take us away, man.
All right. I'm gonna close this out. Ready? Write the help. And maybe you guys have heard about these tools called ChatGPT, Copilot, etc.
Rings a bell.
For all the slings and arrows that those have taken, I'm going to tell you right here, right now, that they're amazing at writing help. When you have written your function from start to the bottom, and you're like, that's pretty good. And if you do like I do, I write my function, and then under the function, I start writing some test cases so I can comment them out and uncomment them out, and just hit F5, and it loads the function code, and then it runs the test. And then I comment that one out and go to the next one. And so I can permutate right through my test really quickly. And then when I'm done, I've been using Copilot, and I say, dear Copilot, please do all the work for me because I want to look amazing, and write the help. And now, of course, I always read it and I always tweak it because it never sounds like me. and it's never 100% accurate. But what it will also do is if you've written your help commands down at your tests at the bottom, is it'll use those as examples. How does it know to do that? But it does it, and it's amazing. Now, here's Steven's pro tip on doing examples. The very last example that I put in my help, I use the example that will be the most used case for the function that I'm writing. That way, when you do get help and it all goes screaming past, the very last example will be what's on screen. And so the most used one is always the last one when I write the help. Here's my pro tip for you.
Yeah, and shout out to having examples that you like for the actual use cases of your thing, especially if you're distributing it and maybe you have a varied mix of skill set. You can consistently point to the examples, like just read the help. And if all of your stuff has that, your team can actually rely on it. If you ship a module and expect them to use it and it doesn't have it, well, you've broken that cycle for them. So maybe a little pester test to make sure that your functions have help. That might be a good little thing for you to add to your workflow as you add things together, one step at a time. Compare yourself to previous you, not anybody else. Wow. Yeah, we covered a lot of dudes. Covered a lot of dudes in this episode. And I want to mention something because we talk about a lot of stuff on PowerShell here on the podcast, but it is kind of an audio only thing. So there's some stuff we can't show. And so this year we've started something new called PowerShell Wednesday. And both of you have been recent speakers. Both of those sessions are actually live on YouTube if you want to check them out. But that's sort of another opportunity for more hands-on learning where we actually look at code and do things together. You can ask questions, we can learn, we can grow, a little bit more hands-on. So I want to thank both of you for attending those and speaking at those as well. It's been a fun experience.
I have been known to troll the chat in the PowerShell Wednesdays. I use it as a breeding ground for my terrible dad jokes. And, speaking of my terrible dad jokes, I thought we were supposed to go all through the night. That way we could be done with the do.
Oh, gosh.
Wow.
You know what? I'm sorry. I feed off of Gilbert's groans because he does them so well.
But he also does dad jokes sometimes too.
Me?
Yeah, don't you?
Very, very, very rarely. I feel like I'm the yin to Steven's yang, right? I need to be here he needs the audience that is most impacted by his jokes. So
I do need it. It's I hear the little Mario coin going off every time. You guys know the sound. But yeah, and for me personally, thanks for having me on again. I do want to say that it is my absolute pleasure to be friends with you two, and I look forward to every conversation we have.
Yeah, we need to meet up more than just when we're recording, but. Gilbert?
Definitely. I mean, I don't think I could have stated that any better. It's been a pleasure meeting you guys in person at Summit and being friends. And again, it's reach out to the community. It's you make some great friends and maybe even get coworkers. Sometimes.
That's right.
But yeah, it's thank you for having me on for PowerShell Wednesday this week. It's funny because this format is one where I know we can cut. If I say something silly, we can cut it out. Whereas that's a live format. Yeah. But the nice thing is also being able to interact with folks. So I think that's really like a special thing. So, thank you for all of this. So,
hey, it's a pleasure.
That's why you're the MVP, dude.
Hey.
That's right.
Hey, we're all in this together, and honestly couldn't do anything I do without the amazing community behind me, both to help me get to where I am now, but also to be guests on the pod and share their perspectives, because just one perspective isn't great, but together, collectively, we can accomplish so much, especially when we feel safe to be ourselves and share that perspective. And it is so cool to live in the community and get to see this all the time, all the kind of fun, happy things, both personally and professionally. Like when people get more money or achieve, some automation at work, that's a huge win that impacts their life all the way down to the other stuff, where you're making money. But hey, thank you everybody for joining us.
Where's my little image here? I'm trying to get it on screen. What you want to do is you want to shortcut your life with PowerShell, right? Now, Gilbert's, we got to see your mug, Gilbert. Come on now. I mean, we see Andrew's podcast. There it is. DevOps. Thank you, Adil, for the design.
Glorious.
And this is fine, dog.
Yes, this is always fine. Everything's
For
always
those of you
fine.
that are on the audio, I'm sorry, you have to tune in to the end of this video.
You will indeed. And while you're there, give us a like, comment, subscribe, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It would be much appreciated, especially if you're listening all the time. You're connected with us. You're growing with us. Let us know how we're doing. Join us on the PDQ Discord. That's where the main place for PowerShell Wednesdays, discord.gg/PDQ. We have a PowerShell scripting channel there, which is awesome. Seen so many people grow in it. So many experts like yourselves who are there sharing their perspectives, collaborating, having just random conversations too. And I guess we'll see you around next week, every single Monday for new episodes of the PowerShell podcast, every single Wednesday for PowerShell Wednesdays. We're just going to keep growing together. And again, wouldn't be possible without the community. And thank you so much to Stephen, Judd, and Gilbert Sanchez. Until next time, my friends.
Thanks for listening to the PowerShell Podcast. The PowerShell Podcast is a PDQ production, making device management simple, secure, and pretty damn quick.